Well, I wrote that article because having spent some time on the streets, sharing the gospel with people, doing college campus ministry, as well as talking to my neighbors and inviting them to church, it seems like no matter how many people I talk to, they always have the three basic common objections. I'm spiritual, I'm not religious, I'm a good person, and that's right for you, and it's not right for me. They often begin to tell you why they're just such a great person, in essence saying maybe that's why I don't need this forgiveness that Jesus offers. They'll tell you about how they raise their children appropriately, they pay their taxes on time, they always show up to work on time. They kind of unload this list of great things that they do. And I think we need to hold before people that you probably do a lot of great things. In fact, you might do better things than I do. You might be out there feeding the homeless and creating orphanages or all these different things, but none of those things will merit heaven. As an unbeliever, those things don't somehow make God pleased with you, because God doesn't look on the outside, He looks in the heart. When people say that, I'll ask questions, well, why do you say that? And then they'll give an answer, or I'll ask questions like, what does it mean to be spiritual as opposed to being religious? And oftentimes what it comes down to is I like to do my own thing, have my own rules, versus going to a church where things are organized and I have to submit to people. So there seems to be a commitment issue there. And I would also suggest that they've probably watched enough TBN and seen these different type of preachers who are requesting money and these televangelists. Not that everyone who's on TV is horrible, but if you watch TV long enough, you'll begin to see people who aren't doing things according to the scriptures, and that kind of imposes certain thoughts upon people, so they want to stay away from that and in essence do their own thing, be spiritual. Well, one of the reasons I think people say that that's right for you, but it's not right for me, is because at some point in their past, or perhaps they know of someone who's been hurt by the church. And this isn't some objection that we should just throw off. There are legitimate reasons that people have for why they have walked away from the church. And those reasons obviously range from someone saying they were a Christian yet they were hypocritical in their actions, to people feeling as if they were judged. I mean, there are a whole spectrum of reasons why people walk away from the church. And so when people say those things, we don't just want to, as the article says, pounce on them and say, well, you need to get back in church because of this, that, and the other. Well, at the end of the day, that's true. But we also need to realize that we've probably been one of the people who have hurt others in the past. We've been hurt by others, and we need to be sympathetic to their issues, to their objections. And so, again, asking questions about how they've been hurt and hopefully developing some of those issues will help them to see that while I've been hurt in the past, quite possibly this won't happen again. I often like to use the example, have you ever been to a bad movie? And most people say, well, sure, I've been to a bad movie. And I say, well, do you still go to movies? And they say, well, of course. And I say, the same thing happens with the church. The church is a hospital, as it's been put in the past. We're all sinners, being sanctified, attempting to grow in the grace and the knowledge of Jesus Christ, and by the sheer fact that we're sinners, we're going to hurt people. One of the things that I've noticed when sharing the gospel, especially with other Christians, is oftentimes when an objection comes, they immediately want to cut the unbeliever off and to begin to answer their objection before they completely say why it is they're objecting to Christianity. And I think there's an issue with that. Oftentimes we can presume what they're saying and think we know the answer, when we may, but we haven't allowed that person to express him or herself completely as to why he or she may not be a Christian. I think as a preacher in particular, but I think just as Christians in the church, we have the desire sometimes to want to speak more than listen. I know that's true for me. You can probably ask my wife and she'll tell you that. But I think we just need to ask questions and listen to what people have to say. They're not a notch on our belt. We're not saying, okay, we got one more for the kingdom. Obviously, we want people to be saved, but they're people. They're made in the image and the likeness of God, and we need to treat them as such and respect them as such. And when we're evangelizing, have a conversation. That's what we're there for. It's not a one-way street. It's not like being behind the pulpit and you're preaching and people are listening. Rather, we're having a dialogue. We want to get to know these people because ultimately we love them and we care about them and we want to see them come to faith. And I think the way to help that process along when we're sharing the gospel and inviting them to church is to listen. So you never know what's going to happen when you're out there sharing the gospel. I think oftentimes people ask the question, well, how effective is this? Well, I guess I don't know how effective it is when it comes from the human perspective, But when it comes from God's perspective, I know the gospel is the power of God unto salvation, and He will do with it what He chooses. It's just my job to get out there and actually tell someone about this message, because how will they hear unless someone is sent to them?